Vegas, which in fact was noted in a recent article by the Washington Times, which I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record.
Without objection.
I understand that some of my colleagues on the other side are frustrated that the whistleblowers have not come forward to speak with them. To be clear, I have communicated this request to the whistleblowers and invited those whistleblowers who have spoken to my office to speak to the majority twice. But they have told me that they have the fear that they will face retribution if their identities become known and that they will lose their jobs. Putting myself in their shoes, I can't blame them. I cannot provide them with protection. And they've also heard members of this Senate dismiss their serious allegations. For example, Senator Carper, the senator from Delaware, referred to the whistleblower allegations as rumor and innuendo. If you were an official who had come forward with serious concerns about improper behavior, potentially putting your livelihood at risk, would you feel comfortable speaking with somebody who has already dismissed your allegations as rumor and innuendo? So we will leave it to the Inspector General's office to consider whistleblower allegations and all of the evidence to determine whether any criminal or inappropriate activity took place. Once again, we will know that judgment in a short 2 months. However, we do have other information that raises serious concerns about this nomination. In the committee's business meeting last week to consider Mr. Mayorkas is a perfect example of why the Senate should wait for the OIG's investigation to be completed. At that meeting, the chairman gave a lengthy opening statement that made a number of concerning and inaccurate statements which served to denigrate the 650 employees at the Office of Inspector General at Homeland Security. The office deserves some criticism, that is for sure, as our subcommittee on financial and contract oversight is determining. Rather than rely on their insights, he came up with some of his own. They are actual misstatements of fact, and they only serve to further obscure a complicated and difficult situation. For example, the chairman claimed that 3 days before the confirmation hearing on July 25th, information about the OIG investigation was leaked to Congress and the media in a highly irregular manner. As he knows, and his own committee record should indicate, the existence of the investigation was not leaked to Congress in a highly irregular manner. It was emailed to his staff, as well as mine, as an official communication by the DHS OIG Congressional Liaison Office. If there was anything irregular about the situation, it was that the White House had not already confirmed that there was an investigation ongoing. We had a right to that information, and it had been improperly kept from us. In the face of the White House's inappropriate omission, the OIG chose to inform us. I'm sure it was a hard choice, but I believe it was the right one. If they had not done so, we would not have known of the investigation of the sort which the Senate in normal times would have given great weight to and not moved forward on. As DHS often tells us, if you see something, say something. The chairman also repeatedly faulted the OIG for refraining from interviewing Mr. Mayorkas until the end of its investigation. Colleagues, I'm sorry, would you please be quiet? The chairman also repeatedly faulted the OIG for refraining from interviewing Mr. Mayorkas until the end of the investigation. This appears to be a criticism born from a lack of experience and knowledge of the investigative process. I would quote, "To my amazement, Director Mayorkas has never been contacted by the OIG about this EV-5-related investigation," he stated at one point. And later he said, "I cannot understand why they have not talked to Mr. Mayorkas. It is common practice to investigate the central figure in an investigation closer to the end of an investigation after evidence has been reviewed and collected. There are many reasons for this practice. One is that you do not know what to ask the subject until you've gathered all the information that you can about his or her alleged misconduct. Another is that it minimizes the impact of the investigation on the subject, which can be an understandable concern when investigating a busy top official like our present nominee. Early meetings can result in having to hold several interviews with the same official, asking questions about topics or allegations which could eventually be dismissed without their testimony by identifying exculpatory evidence beforehand. While the scheduling of this interview was upsetting to the chairman, it should not be to Mr. Mayorkas. He is a seasoned prosecutor and familiar with the process of investigations, and he knows what to expect. The chairman also claimed at the committee vote that the OIG has repeatedly given him deadlines and had missed them. The chairman inferred that we could not trust their word on when this investigation could be completed. Specifically, he said, and I quote, "I was informed that the investigation was likely to conclude in October." Later, he claimed, "We have no guarantee this investigation will simply not drag on and on. It has already slipped several times. Each time we get an estimated timeline for completion, the date slips," he added. "First we were told October, then perhaps December, and as of last week, the IG said there was at least months of work remaining." None of this is true. According to my office records of the conversations with the Inspector General, we have no record or recollection that the Inspector General ever promised a date certain of completion in October. Neither do we have any record indicating the IG suggested December. Unless the IG communicated to the chairman these deadlines in private conversations, which he arranged without my knowledge or involvement, these statements appear to be simply false. I would also say I cannot imagine the chairman or his staff would engage in a private conversation with the Inspector General regarding a sensitive investigation into a political official. Such conversations would be a breach not only of our practices, but could raise ethical concerns of exerting undue influence upon an official proceeding. I urge him to correct the record or show us in detail what conversations the IG made these points and promises. The chairman also stated this fact, and news outlets erroneously reported this inaccurate claim, that the investigation is to be handled by only one investigator and 2 assistants. His quote was, "We learned that there's only one investigator assigned." He claimed 1 investigator and 2 research assistants. This is not true either. The OIG has told our staff the case has a lead investigator that is true, an absolute common practice for investigations in most investigative and sensitive endeavors. But they were further told that the OIG had a rotating team of investigators, experts, research assistants, and staff help on various aspects of the investigation. This is a common practice, assigning leads to individual investigations but sharing a larger pool of assistant and investigative resources. It is followed to a great extent by our own permanent subcommittee on investigations. I don't understand why the chairman's characterization would stray so far from the facts established in conversations involving both our staffs or from common sense. I'm also disappointed that he characterized the investigation as having the lack of progress, which was unacceptable and unfair to Mr. Mayorkas, but to a department full of people who need leadership and to a nation that is counting on the department to help protect them, end quote. The truth is, it is not uncommon for investigations of senior officials to last a year or longer, and is not a matter which should be rushed by anyone, certainly not the chairman of the authorizing committee. This is the kind of rhetoric which causes concern in some quarters that the chairman and others are applying inappropriate pressure on an agency's internal processes and deliberation. Political pressure is simply not helpful to anyone. In fact, it can actually hinder the investigation and weaken public acceptance of the findings, particularly if they exonerate Mr. Mayorkas. People may allege, as they have already, that the Office of Inspector General waters down and weakens its finding in response to political pressure such as this. If the OIG investigation results in a clean bill of health for Mr. Mayorkas, how many Americans, how many DHS employees will wonder if the chairman's repeated disparaging remarks were indicative of a political pressure he applied which improperly swayed the results? No one is served by his comments. What's more, they are not a reflection of the shared concern he voiced with me in our joint correspondence to the Inspector General. I simply do not understand why he would intervene in such a vocal, public way, which could cast doubt and suspicion on the results of the investigation. The other thing about this vote is it's unfair to Mr. Mayorkas. I've talked a lot about process and the need for us to know the findings of the DHS OIG report before we vote on Mr. Mayorkas. But no one seems to understand that just how fair this vote is to the nominee. By pushing his nomination through both the committee and the full Senate, Senator Carper and Leader Reid have denied Mr. Mayorkas a chance to win bipartisan support. I've only voted against one nominee that's come through our committee, only one out of 20. I would like to be able to vote for Mr. Mayorkas if, in fact, the OIG shows him a clean bill. The reason it's so sad that he can't win bipartisan support is under the new Senate rules, it's possible for my colleagues to confirm him without a single Republican vote. And when they do that, they will be delivering to the department a nominee who arrives with only his party support, and he will be trailed by a cloud of doubt and discontent. The allegations against Mr. Mayorkas relate mainly to his management of the EB-5 immigrant visa program in his role as Director of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. As I understand it, the investigation into Mr. Mayorkas began in an unconventional way by one person speaking out after their heavily documented concerns were dismissed. To me, this only adds validity to the allegations. In the course of its investigation, the DHS OIG discovered other allegations of impropriety, including conflicts of interest, misuse of position, mismanagement, and the appearance of impropriety. Those allegations could speak to a candidate's fitness for public service, especially if he's not fully cleared to help lead the Department of Homeland Security. It is wholly unreasonable to ask senators to endorse the nominee's fitness for service until those questions are answered. In an attempt to discredit the investigation, some people have cited the problems plaguing leadership in the DHS OIG office, the Inspector General in particular. In fact, the Financial and Contracting Oversight Subcommittees of Homeland Security and Government Affairs is currently conducting and will release soon their bipartisan investigation into a number of allegations. While I agree those allegations surrounding OIG leadership are troubling, the problems of one person do not invalidate the work done by an office of over 650 people. OIG work in every agency should be taken seriously. In January of this year, Senator Carper joined me and members of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee in sending a letter to President Obama urging him to fill the vacant Inspector General positions at a number of key agencies, including DHS. In that letter, we said, and I quote, "Inspector Generals are an essential component of government oversight. We do a disservice to that statement when we preclude the opportunity to, at a minimum, review the work done by the DHS OIG, draw our own conclusions, and then vote accordingly without all the facts before us." Even more concerning, by denigrating the open DHS OIG investigation, the Senate is sending a message to other OIGs that their investigations don't matter. Obviously, that is incredibly significant given our dependence on these watchdogs to oversee the huge government agencies and bureaucracies created by this body. We must respect and support the work done by Inspector Generals. In my opinion, the damage being done to the DHS OIG and the respective IGs throughout the government by holding this vote is far worse than any damage done by the office's current leadership. The results of this investigation are not the only unknown regarding Mr. Mayorkas' service as Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Despite a number of concerns regarding national security and criminal vulnerabilities in the EB-5 program, we know the program expanded drastically under the nominee's hand. And we've not yet seen evidence that he pursued significant regulatory changes to address the weaknesses that were known. 2 months ago, I personally asked DHS and other agencies for an answer on how the administration is dealing with the concerns, and I've received no response as of yet. These include an October 18th letter. I requested information from Acting Secretary Rand Beers on EB-5 national security concerns identified by the agency itself in a draft report. I received no response. The same day, I also asked Acting Director, ICE Director John Sadwig for the same information. I received no response. I also requested information from National Security Advisor Susan Rice regarding no national security concerns created by the EB-5 program. To date, I've received no response. Just last month, on November 1st, Senator Grassley and I requested information from Acting Secretary Beers on how the agency is addressing the known national concerns with EB-5. Again, silence, no response. I'd ask unanimous consent that these letters requesting information be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Given that we are considering promoting Director Mayorkas to be second in command at DHS, it is appropriate we consider how he managed this program and whether he addressed criminal and national security concerns, including exploitation of the EB-5 Regional Center program by terrorists, by spies, and other threatening actors. These weaknesses were apparently the subject of repeated examinations by the administration. I have repeatedly pressed the administration for more information regarding the weaknesses in the EB-5 program under Director Mayorkas and what actions it has taken to remedy those weaknesses. The chairman has declined to join in this inquiry. Why is that? Why would the chairman decline to join to find out the truth? I have not received documents or any of the information I've requested. At the same time, there is no public record of steps Director Mayorkas has taken to address EB-5 concerns. For example, to date, USCIS has failed to promulgate any regulations shutting down regional centers being exploited by criminals or terrorists. This raises serious concerns with me. When Congress created the EB-5 program in 1990, the goal was to stimulate the U.S. economy through job creation and capital investment by foreign investors. To that end, the original program, called the Basic Immigrant Investor Program, required immigrant investors to invest $1 million in a commercial enterprise that would create or preserve at least 10 jobs. The investor is initially granted conditional permanent residency, but after 2 years in proving the creation of 10 jobs, they are eligible to become a permanent resident. In 1992, Congress authorized the second EB-5 pilot program, allowing immigrants to pool investment through DHS-approved regional centers. In seeking approval from DHS, the regional center submits a proposal to DHS detailing how it plans to promote economic growth in that region. By investing in a regional center, immigrant investors can take advantage of relaxed job standards to measure both direct and indirect job creation. While direct jobs are actual identifiable jobs for qualified employees, indirect jobs are considered those created collaterally by the investment. While the Regional Center program was set to expire at the end of 2012, last September it was reauthorized for 3 more years. Despite no national security concerns, no changes were made to the program by the Judiciary Committee. In total, over 25,000 people are currently in the United States through the EB-5 program. Since its inception, the EB-5 program has been plagued with wide-ranging problems. Mr. Mayorkas took over this program in 2009. There's been a notable expansion of the program since he took it over. It now sees $3.3 billion passed from foreign investors in exchange for visas to reside in our country. Yet the serious security weaknesses persisted, as well as an alarm among senior officials. These problems include the agency failing to determine if the program is meeting its basic goal of creating 10 jobs per investment, and defrauding would-be immigrants with breaches of national security, with suspected terrorists using the program to enter the United States. In 2012, the National Security Staff coordinated a review of the EB-5 Regional Center program by 5 agencies focused on vulnerabilities relating to the financial flows and security offerings that routinely accompany the investment component of the EB-5 program. That draft report raised major concerns with the investments being made by EB-5 investors. For example, the investigation found one regional center filed false documentation in an attempt to support the creation of jobs. The same report also noted investments being made in a business that never existed and could never exist, headed by an individual using a pseudonym due to a criminal record of importing counterfeit products into this country. The draft review noted that the high-risk EB-5 program participants may attempt to use the program as a tool or a channel for money laundering, tax evasion, or other illicit financial activity. This type of activity was aided by the fact that known criminals are not statutorily prohibited from owning, managing, or recruiting regional centers. We just reauthorized that. This national security staff draft review also references another interagency review looking at the national security threats associated with the EB-5 program, stating that the vulnerabilities relating to possible infiltration by terrorist groups or foreign operatives are also before the NSS and are being addressed by the interagency task force. Understanding that we've only seen a draft of the National Security Staff's forensic audit and have not seen the information about the interagency review of possible infiltration by terrorist groups or foreign operatives, I wrote to Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, on October 18th requesting that information. She has not addressed any concern. She has not answered our letter. The Department of Homeland Security also conducted its own internal assessment of the EB-5 Regional Center program, examining criminal and national security vulnerabilities. In response to a tasking from DHS Secretary, ICE prepared a review of the program. Here are the vulnerabilities that they noted and identified: export of sensitive technology, economic espionage, use by foreign government agents espionage, use by terrorists, investment fraud by regional centers, investment fraud by investors in this country, fraud conspiracies by investors in regional centers, illicit finance, and money laundering. The agency's own draft analysis makes clear that the EB-5 Regional Center program can be exploited by terrorists, criminals, and foreign operatives. Further, it identified regional centers as a means for facilitating espionage at the highest levels by foreign governments. To that end, the review by ICE proposed the Regional Center program be sunsetted, be done away with, because there can be no safeguards that can be put in place that will ensure the integrity of the regional center model. As I stated before, I sought more information about DHS and ICE's internal review of the EB-5 program. I wrote to Acting Secretary Beers on October 18th requesting information about the findings of this review and what actions were taken in response. I have not yet received a response to my inquiry. Recently, we received a draft DHS OIG EB-5 Regional Center audit. It's my understanding that we're soon to get this final report. In the draft, it includes the following statement: USIS, under Secretary Mayorkas, fails to ensure regional centers meet all program requirements. USIS, under the nominee, Mr. Mayorkas, officials can inconsistently apply program regulations and policies. USIS doesn't always properly document decisions and responses, giving the appearance that the program is vulnerable to inappropriate influence, all under the guise of the nominee that we will vote on late tonight. Since the program is so poorly run by USIS, the draft DHS OIG determined USIS is limited in its ability to prevent fraud or national security threats that could harm the U.S. Nor could the agency see where the EB-5 program was improving the U.S. economy and creating jobs for U.S. citizens as intended by Congress. This draft report also outlines a number of recommended actions for the Director. Last week, Senator Carper asserted it was Congress's fault the EB-5 program was susceptible to fraud and national security threats because it hadn't provided the proper statutory authority. And that new statutory authority that was included in S-744, the immigration bill, would have solved the problem. But the draft DHS OIG report makes clear that under its existing authority, the agency has the ability to issue regulations to deny and even terminate regional centers identified as fraudulent or national security risks, but has failed to do so. They also recommended that the director provide USIS with the authority to deny and terminate EB-5 regional center participants at any phase of the process when known connections to national security or fraud risks are identified. That they should make explicit that fraud and national concerns can constitute a cause for revocation. That he should give USIS the authority to verify that the foreign funds were invested in companies that create U.S. jobs. Ensure that the requirements for the EB-5 Regional Center program are consistently applied to all participants. None of these recommendations request any additional congressional authority. Therefore, it's at least arguable that the action could have been taken by Director Mayorkas to prevent national security vulnerabilities in the EB-5 program. That didn't happen. The draft report also recommends other corrective actions to be taken by Director Mayorkas as well. Since USIS failed to properly apply its existing EB-5 policies and procedures, DHS OIG recommended developing a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Commerce, Labor, and the SEC to provide expertise and involvement in the adjudication of applications and petitions for the EB-5 Regional Center program. A third recommendation in the draft report related to the failure of the agency to maintain any metric as to whether the program was actually achieving its intended purpose. The DHS OIG asserted Director Mayorkas should conduct comprehensive reviews to determine how EB-5 funds have actually stimulated growth in the U.S. economy in accordance with the intent of the program. That hasn't been done. Finally, the draft report directs Mr. Mayorkas to ensure quality assurance steps to promote program integrity and ensure that regional centers comply with the Code of Federal Regulations. The implication there is that they don't. All of these recommendations raise serious concerns about the way Director Mayorkas was overseeing the EB-5 program and, in turn, should be considered as a qualifying factor to determine his fitness to be second in command in charge at Department of Homeland Security. To summarize, we know that the National Security Staff and the Department of Homeland Security conducted reviews of the investor visa program that Mr. Mayorkas has been overseeing since 2009. These reviews found that the program created a danger to national security, including the threat of exploitation by spies, criminals, and other national security threats. I and others have asked for more information about the potential national security vulnerabilities in the EB-5 Regional Center program, and we've received no answers. What we do know is that Director Mayorkas dramatically expanded a program that the administration and even DHS itself apparently believes to be a threat to national security. And according to a draft report by the Inspector General, he did not take the actions that he should have taken that were at his disposal to fix these vulnerabilities and to make sure that this visa program wasn't bringing spies, terrorists, or other threats to national security into the country. And then finally, I would say that this vote is not fair to the Department of Homeland Security. DHS is the agency we trust to secure our borders, make our skies safe, and to help our nation protect ourselves from terrorism. We know that the Department has faced many challenges and has often struggled to execute its responsibility over the past 10 years since its inception. And DHS has had some of the lowest morale in the government. This week, the Senate voted with strong bipartisan support to approve Jay Johnson's nomination to be the Secretary of the DHS. I was proud to support his nomination. He's the kind of leader that DHS needs to help it address its many challenges and to fulfill its mission of making our nation safe. He needs a strong second in command when he and all of the Department's 240,000 employees can have full confidence in. It is this body's job to vet those leaders to ensure they are beyond reproach. With the cloud of this investigation, with many of our unanswered questions about Director Mayorkas' tenure at the Director of USIS, we do not have full confidence that he should be in second command at DHS. By voting on him now, this body is sending the wrong message to all DHS employees. Right now, we cannot, let me repeat, we cannot determine whether Mr. Mayorkas is fit or unfit for this important position. And then finally, I would say that this vote is not fair to the American people. In confirming the nominee for such an important position who has not been properly vetted, the American public depends on us to fulfill our constitutional mandate to properly advise the President on certain executive branch nominees. Here we are not doing that. We are not doing that. In fact, we are voting to install a nominee that could be seen as unfit to serve in the number 2 position at DHS. He may be fit, but this agency is tasked with protecting our country from terrorists. It is our responsibility to guarantee to the American public that leaders at DHS are beyond reproach. In this vote, Leader Reid is not only ignoring the rights of the minority, but the long-standing precedent of the Senate. He's ignoring history, and he's inviting us all to do the same. But history has a difficult way of teaching its lessons. It was long the purpose of the Senate procedures to remember these lessons so the country does not have to suffer such lessons again and again. My final comments are this. Those who are going to vote for Mr. Mayorkas do so at the risk of not knowing what the investigation shows. They also do so at the risk of obviating their oath that they swore when they came to this body to fairly and appropriately evaluate their decisions about advising consent. My hope is that Mr. Mayorkas is cleared. But unfortunately, he won't have my vote and several of my colleagues because we don't have the information with which to make that judgment. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Madam President, let me first of all acknowledge that at 11:15 tonight we're going to be voting on the National Defense Authorization Act. This is one that is a must-pass bill. It's one that has passed prior to December 31st every year for the last 53 years. So it is very significant that, and I think people are tired of hearing about it because they recognize the significance and the fact that it has to be done now. So I'm not going to say anything about that. I originally came down, Madam President, to talk about, in my state of Oklahoma, the problems that we are having with individuals. And I have a long list of people from all throughout the state who have talked about their insurance being canceled, talking about the increase in the deductibles and the cost of insurance, and about the crisis that we're facing in the state of Oklahoma with Obamacare. Now, since I just found out there are several senators who want to talk about their states, I will merely submit for the record a list of individuals who are having very serious problems in my state of Oklahoma with Obamacare. Instead of that, and so I ask unanimous consent that be included in the record at this point.
Without objection.
Instead of that, I just want to mention one thing that has been overlooked in this debate. I've mentioned it once before. A lot of people have not recognized that, and that is the ultimate goal of Obamacare. And this has come from the leaders on the Democrat side, including the President of the United States, would be a single-payer system. A single-payer system is socialized medicine. And it's kind of interesting. I remember back when we had Hillary Health Care, back in the early 90s, when we'd ask the question, you know, if it doesn't work in Denmark, doesn't work in Sweden, doesn't work in Canada, doesn't work in the UK, why would it work here? And they never say it, but they were thinking, if I were running it, it would work here. So anyway, that's the ultimate goal, and I want to share a personal experience. Then I'll yield to the rest of the members who want to talk about their states. I had a personal experience 2 months ago. I went in for a colonoscopy, just a routine thing, and they, after checking me and going through the thing, they came and said, well, I have good news and bad news. I said, all right, what is it? He said, well, the good news is your colon's fine. The bad news is you're about to die because you have obstruction, 100% obstruction in 2 valves, 90% in 2 other valves, arteries, I should say, and 75% in the other arteries. So anyway, I had emergency 4 bypasses just at that moment. Now, I say that because if I had been in the UK at my age, there would be a mandatory 6-month waiting period, and I wouldn't be standing here today. If I had been in, I think it was Canada, it's like 2 years. So all of these, this lets you know that ultimately, and I've heard from our good friends, the doctors who are members of the Senate, like Senator Barrasso, talking about, you know, what is happening in these other countries. I was visiting with Jackie Davidson just a few minutes ago, who's scheduled for open-heart surgery on this Monday. And I was talking to him a little bit about, quite frankly, how much easier it was than I thought it was going to be. But the point is this. The same thing happened with my wife. At a certain age, if you are to have this, in these countries, it doesn't work. You are denied the opportunity to have surgery. And so that, to me, I think needs to be back in our minds as we talk about the current problems we're having with Obamacare and the fact that what the ultimate goal is. And lastly, I'll say I've been contacted by 2 of my good friends who are members of Parliament from the UK, and they asked me the question, why is it you and your country are now trying to adopt something that we're trying to get away from over here in the UK. So let's keep in mind there is one big overriding problem that if we cave in now, we will be reaching. With that, I will yield to my colleagues who want to speak.
Senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, a number of my colleagues have come down here, and this isn't the first time we've done this. We've done this on several occasions. Because most of us are getting emails and phone calls and letters into our offices of real-world, real-life experiences that people are having with Obamacare. And it's a reminder that the things that we do here have real-world impacts out there across the country. And I know as someone who represents the state of South Dakota, I've come down here and shared a number of stories of constituents of mine who've been adversely impacted in the form of higher premiums, canceled coverages, higher deductibles, all things that are doing great economic harm to the people in our respective states. And so I just want to share quickly here a note that I got from a constituent in Rapid City, South Dakota. He says, as my congressional representative, you need to know how Obamacare is harming my life and health care. My insurance company canceled my policy. I'm currently paying over $800 a month for a family of 4. To upgrade my policy, it will be over $900 a month, and if I sign up for Obamacare, I would be paying over $2,500 a month. I cannot think of any way that this is considered affordable health care. Madam President, this is just another of many examples that I have from my state of South Dakota that my colleagues have that point out how this law is flawed, the economic harm that's doing to the American people, why it's so important that we here in the United States Senate take steps to change it and do it soon before it's too late.
Madam President.
Excuse me, Peter. Is this a colloquy or do I call on each senator? Without objection.
Madam President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Madam President, like the senator from South Dakota, our office continues to get emails and phone calls and contacts from our constituents. Tonight I'd like to read an email that we received from David and Shannon McKitchen. They write, I'm trying to contact you with very little left to do. My wife and I, as of today, received a notice that our health policy is going up from $389 per month to $1,177 per month. That's a more than 200% increase. Basically, it's going from $4,600 per year to $14,000 per year. This is for the same level we have, which is an HSA policy, $5,000 maximum out-of-pocket per year. This policy works for us as we are both self-employed small business owners. We have been hammered during the economic downturn, and this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. We feel that our government is attacking us, and we have nowhere to turn. We are both in our mid-50s, and if things stay the same, we'll be without health insurance. I have always provided for my own needs, but this is making things impossible. Please advise, what are we to do? Please fight for us, and know we do not have a voice without you. I was a city council representative for 15 years and always fought for the working man. But I now know that it is becoming a losing battle. Madam President, this is just one example. Last week we were on the floor and I read a number of emails and with comments saying things like, you need to understand how cheated we feel. This is not right. I cannot afford this. Why are we being forced to change to a plan that has benefits we don't need? Please help. Sir, I'm begging for your help. I'm feeling very upset and stressed. This is unfair and hurting working families. This law is hurting us. Be our voice. We need your help. I guess we are the collateral damage. Why are they trying to destroy us in the process? We are scared. Madam President, we are hearing the voice of the American people. We are hearing the voice of Wisconsinites. The Senate must hear the voice of the American people and act. The sooner the better. I yield the floor.
Senator from Iowa.
Like my colleagues and like I have done several times before, I come to the floor to share the voice of one of many Iowans who have contacted me over the sticker shock that they're experiencing under the Affordable Care Act. So this time I quote a constituent from Sioux County, Iowa, northwest Iowa. That constituent writes, and I quote, I am a pastor in rural Iowa, and early this past summer, trusting naively in the integrity of our President's repeated promise that if you like your health insurance, you can keep it, period, I made a change in my policy, moving to a higher deductible to save the church money. Now I have been informed that because of that change, my policy is no longer grandfathered, and therefore I will be forced out of it in a year and compelled to purchase a more expensive, Unaffordable Care Act compliant policy. I am young, male, healthy, and will not qualify for any subsidy. In effect, because of legislation Democrats supported, my government is kicking me off from health coverage that I carefully researched, chose, and like a lot, and forcing me to buy coverage that I do not need at a price I scarcely can afford. And the government has the audacity to resort to the Orwellian doublespeak and call such a draconian policy the Affordable Care Act. Please convey to your Democratic colleagues that I grew up on a dairy farm and now pastor a church of farmers. I am the epitome of middle-class America that they claim to champion. This bill is unjust. It is based on lies to Americans like myself. It hurts real people, including the church I serve, end of quote. I have done my job, Mr. President. I have shared this constituent's message with my colleagues as he asked me to do. I hope that they were listening. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I join my colleagues on the floor tonight to tell stories of what we're hearing from our constituents at home. And I would say, Madam President, that the newspaper from Madam President's home state, the New York Times, this morning, front page story, uninsured, skeptical of health care law in poll. This whole law was passed to try to deal with issues of the uninsured. This article on the front page of today's New York Times says 53% of the uninsured disapprove of the law. 53% of the uninsured disapprove of the law. Then they go through some of the numbers, and it looks like the same number of people who think they will be helped an equal number of people who are uninsured think they will actually be hurt by this law. Another headline, Wall Street Journal, errors continue to plague health site, but the healthcare site website is just the tip of the iceberg. Sure, there have been website failures, but the thing that's hurting Americans all around the country are the higher premiums that the senator from Iowa talked about, the canceled coverage that the senator from Iowa talked about, people who can't keep their doctor in spite of the president's promise, fraud and identity theft, and higher copays and deductibles, which we now know are actually going to be higher after the law has been passed, specifically for the bronze policies, than they were all last year before the law came into effect. So I'd like to share a letter from a woman in Carbon County, Wyoming, who writes about the harmful effect of the health care law for her life and for her health care. She says, I currently have health insurance through my husband's employer, but the reality is that the current health insurance that we have may not be available much longer. This is scary to me since I recently did some insurance shopping for my mother. She said her mother is 63 years old and in good health. She said I was only able to get 2 quotes. The cheapest quote was for $756 a month with a $6,000 deductible. So we see higher premiums and we see higher copays and deductibles. The prescription deductible for that particular plan was also $500, and then the copay for the prescription was still around $35. The other quote seemed like a better plan and had better copay on prescriptions, but that premium was $985 a month. And that is also with a $6,000 deductible. She says, what the heck? Who can afford these kinds of premiums? This is more than most mortgage payments. But yet, Madam President, the President of the United States said if you like your coverage, you can keep your coverage. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Went on national TV, sat with Bill Clinton a few days before the website was opened, and he said it's going to be easier to use than Amazon, cheaper than your cell phone bill, and if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. It's fascinating that the President was so clueless about his own law, and here we are today, people suffering all around the country, and the President doing nothing about it. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, I came to the floor last week, and for 45 minutes I pulled this folder out of my desk. It was my notes that I talked about in 2009 about the Affordable Care Act before it became law. I talked about the increases that were projected in premiums and deductibles, talked about the networks that would change, the doctors that wouldn't be available. You know, I wasn't a prophet. I was reporting what people like the chief actuary were saying at CMS at the time. Hospitals were going to close, doctors weren't going to take benefits under the new plan, and more importantly, the premiums and deductibles were going to become unaffordable, not affordable. Well, I'm here tonight to read a letter from Donna Holcher in Clemens, North Carolina, right in the middle of the state. She said, we own a small automotive repair shop and have had continuous health insurance coverage our entire life, either through our company or for the past several years on the individual market. We learned that our high deductible plan with a health savings account was not grandfathered into the Affordable Care Act about 4 months ago. Of course, at that time, no pricing was available. We were paying $679 per month and felt that we were protected from catastrophic sickness, injury, and we liked the flexibility the health savings account provided in meeting our other expenses like dental and optical. We checked with Blue Cross once the cost for new silver plans they are mapping us to was available, and it's going to cost $1,379 per month. What a shock to the system, and I'm not at all sure it has as much coverage as what we're losing. I'm pretty much a deer in the headlights. not knowing where we're going to turn, afraid to get onto the ACA website and give my information because I don't trust the security of it. It's totally foreign to me to apply for government subsidies for something we've always paid for and never depended on government to help us. This goes against everything we believe in being a hard-working, independent person. There are problems with health care and with costs, no doubt, but this is not making it more affordable. And from what I'm hearing, doctors are retiring early and not taking these new policies. I feel like I'm spinning the wheels of my brain, trying to find out the right way to go. This has pulled the rug from under my family. Madam President, we're now within 3 days of what was the cutoff. We've now extended the enrollment period to the end of March. But insurers are required April 1 to April 27th of 2014 to submit their pricing for 2015. And I've heard the folks talk about, well, this is only about 8% of the American people that this applies to in 2014. In 2015, it's all of the American people. It's big business, it's small business, and you know what's going to happen? When they price this products with no experience of the risk pool this year, prices are going to go up. Deductibles are going to go up. If you think it's unaffordable this year, wait until you see what hits the 90% of the American people in 2015. It's time for us to change this. It's time for us to fix it. It's time for us to get an affordable health care policy in place in this country. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Arkansas.
Thank you, Madam President. As a result of Obamacare, millions will be forced to use money that they would have used to pay rent, help their children attend college, or invest in a business. Instead, they're going to have to use that money to pay for higher premiums and skyrocketing deductibles. Here's one such example from Huntsville, Arkansas, which is in the congressional district which I used to represent when I was in the House. This constituent writes about how he and his family must have to take drastic steps to be able to afford the cost of Obamacare, not the least of which includes returning to work after retiring last year. The email reads, "I've never before contacted a senator until today. Sir, I am outraged about the Obamacare issue and the Affordable Care Act. Because of recent developments over the Affordable Health Care Act and the obvious problematic issues related to its operation, policy, and implementation, we are selling 2 of our vehicles to save money. This is due to the direct impact of this legislation and due to the broken promises of President Barack Obama that have been repeated over and over to us for 3 years. We are also canceling our cable TV in order to save about $1,500 per year. We are cutting back on Internet and switching to save another $1,000 per year. We are Christmas shopping in January. Our purchase of a new vehicle is now delayed for another 3 years. Our planned vacation trips for 2014 and beyond are being pared back." This is the #1 issue that I'm hearing from Arkansans, the high cost and in some cases the unaffordable cost of Obamacare. And it's interesting as we hear other members of the Senate come and read the same types of emails, the same types of letters that they're getting. They all have the same thing. They're put in positions that are simply untenable. They simply don't have the money to afford the so-called new insurance that they needed as their old insurance was dropped from them. Now, we need health care reform, but Obamacare certainly isn't the answer. We need to transition the employer-based private insurance market towards ones that allows for flexibility, choice, portability, and fairness. Let's allow small business owners to pull together to purchase group insurance, introduce portability into the market. These are things that we need to do and continue. Some of these things are actually in the Affordable Care Act. And yet the reality is we can do that without $1 trillion of increased taxes and rapidly, because of the way that the business community is responding, making us a nation of part-time employees. We need to allow individuals to purchase insurance across state lines. We need to expand health savings account and flexible savings accounts. These are free market reforms that would drive down costs. The problem that we had prior to introducing the Affordable Care Act was affordability. And what's happened is, instead of driving down cost, we've driven up cost dramatically because of the way that the bill was structured. We also need medical malpractice reform. I'm an optometrist by training, and I can tell you that there's people all over the country in the course of taking care of patients that have to do things that are above and beyond sometimes the things that they feel like they need to do in order to protect themselves. And as a result, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. That definitely drives cost. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Delaware.
Madam President, good evening. I had not anticipated coming to the floor tonight to talk about health care in this country, but I feel compelled to do so after listening to a number of our colleagues share with us letters, messages from folks whose lives have been adversely affected, apparently because of changes made in the coverage of their health care through the Affordable Care Act. I regret any of the consequences that have been shared with us here this evening. And my hope is that we will find ways over the coming weeks and coming months to address the kind of concerns that have been raised. But I just wish I'd heard some of that concern in past years as we prepared to take up the Affordable Care Act in the Finance Committee where I serve. I wish I'd heard those kind of concerns about the millions, tens of millions of people in this country who really don't have any health care coverage tonight, some 40 million. For a lot of them, health care is a chance to go to the emergency room of the hospital. When they get really sick, be admitted to the hospital, they get the care they want. It's hugely expensive. And ultimately, for the rest of us, because we pay for it. But where's the outcry on behalf of those tens of millions of people? And where was the outcry 4 years ago when we had several million people who signed up for the Medicare prescription drug program and found that when their purchases of prescription medicines reach a certain level, $3,000 or $4,000 a year, instead of Medicare paying 75% of the cost for their medicines beyond that in a year, Medicare paid nothing. That's the donut hole. A lot of people fell into it. A lot of older people fell into it. And they couldn't afford the medicines that they needed to stay well or stay out of the hospital. And where was the outcry on behalf of fixing that problem? Where was the outcry on behalf of the millions of young people? When they turned 22, they were dropped off of their parents' health insurance plans. They aged out. Where was the outcry in those cases? We've had Republican, Democratic presidents who've had a chance for years, for decades, to do something about the fact that we spend twice as much money for health care as the rest of the world, don't necessarily get better results, and don't cover everybody. And frankly, I didn't hear a lot of outcry from our friends on the other side of the aisle during all those years. And as much as we feel for the people whose stories they shared with us here tonight, I just wish that the sympathy, the empathy that they feel for the folks who sent the letters to them that we've heard, I wish that same sympathy and empathy had been extended to some of the people who we now don't fall into that donut hole when their prescription drug programs exceed a certain amount during a year. Now we have people 22, 23, 24, 25 years old who don't time off or age out off of their parents' health care coverage. They're covered up to their 26th birthday. And we will add to the number of people who have health insurance over the next year or so, somewhere between 5 and 10 million people who have health care coverage either because they are able to qualify in the Medicaid program or because they'll get coverage through one of our state exchanges across this nation. Is the Affordable Care Act perfect? No. Are there problems with it? Sure. Anything this big, anything this difficult to do, there's going to be problems. I think that the implementation, the startup in October, November, which is totally unacceptable. We're trying to work our way through it and provide the kind of access to this coverage, explanation for this coverage that people deserve. And eventually we'll get this right. Eventually we'll get this right. And the outcry now and that we hear attributed to the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, it reminds me a lot of the outcry we heard in, I want to say 2006, 2007, when we were beginning to implement the Medicare prescription drug program. To put it bluntly, it was a mess. People were confused by it. The information technology didn't work. The headlines in the newspaper actually look a lot like the headlines from October and November, even now. But a year or two later, guess what? We fixed the program with everything but the donut hole. And today, we fixed the donut hole, starting about 4 years ago, through the Affordable Care Act. And people don't fall off that cliff anymore like they used to. So rather than simply criticizing the provisions of the Affordable Care Act that are troublesome or problematic, why don't we fix them? Why don't we fix them? And that's what we did with the prescription drug program, Part D, under Medicare. That's what we should do here. Well, Madam President, I did not come here tonight to respond to our colleagues. I just felt that somebody needed to say something, and I'm pleased I had that opportunity. Madam President, I rise tonight to speak in strong support of the nomination of Alejandro Mayorkas to serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I spoke yesterday here about Director Mayorkas' impeccable credentials and experience that have prepared him for this important position. My colleague from Louisiana, Senator Landrieu, did the same yesterday. And today, I'd like to address some of the concerns about Director Mayorkas that have been raised by our friends on the other side of the aisle and seek to set the record straight. Now, I understand that some of our Republican colleagues believe that we cannot move forward with consideration of Director Mayorkas' nomination until the Office of Inspector General finishes its investigation begun, get this, in September of 2012. An investigation begun into his management of the complex EB-5 program some 15 months ago, 15 months. Well, I must say I just disagree with my Republican colleagues. I think we've waited long enough. I think we've waited long enough. Let me explain why. As I said before, the Department of Homeland Security has been without a Deputy Secretary since April of this year, 8 full months. And 6 months have passed since Director Mayorkas was nominated. And for much of those months, for many of those months, we did not have a Senate-confirmed Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Just 3 days before Mr. Mayorkas' confirmation hearing in July, information about the OIG investigation was leaked to Congress, and the media in a highly irregular manner. The information that was leaked indicated that in September 2012, the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security had received allegations about conflicts of interest, misuse of position, and an appearance of impropriety by Director Mayorkas and other agency officials. We also now know that the OIG did not actually begin investigating these allegations for almost 1 year after receiving them. Importantly, the OIG confirmed that this was not in any way a criminal investigation. Let me say that again, because some of our friends on the other side of the aisle seem to be confused about this. The OIG confirmed in July of this year, we confirmed in December of this year, just earlier this month, that this is not and never has been a criminal investigation. To my amazement, Director Mayorkas has never been contacted nor interviewed by the OIG about this investigation. No phone call, no letter, no email, nothing in 15 months. Director Mayorkas only learned of this investigation after its existence had been leaked to the Congress in July, just days before our committee hearing on his nomination. Even then, Director Mayorkas ably and vigorously disputed the allegations in his interviews with committee members who would meet with him and staff who would meet with him, as well as at his confirmation hearing in July. Unfortunately, rather than question the nominee about this matter and give him a chance to refute these anonymous allegations, the Republican members of our committee boycotted his confirmation hearing and have refused to meet with Director Mayorkas to give him an opportunity to respond to these allegations from people whose names and faces we don't even know. Senator Grassley said this week that Director Mayorkas has been given a chance to defend himself and has, quote, utterly failed, close quote, to reply to Senator Grassley's letters. On the contrary, Director Mayorkas did, in fact, respond to Senator Grassley's letters this past August 20th. In fact, he would have gladly spoken with Senator Grassley or any other senator, Democrat or Republican, about the allegations face to face. That's the way we do things in Delaware. I can't imagine it's not the way we do things in other states. I'm perplexed that an even better option, speaking to Director Mayorkas himself, was not taken advantage of by Senator Grassley. In fact, I offered to fly to Iowa with Director Mayorkas in August to meet with Senator Grassley, face to face, so that Senator Grassley could have his questions answered face to face. But sadly, Senator Grassley declined. So I think the record shows that Director Mayorkas has been eager to meet with senators on both sides of the aisle to answer their questions, not to duck them, but to answer them. But our colleagues on the other side have been unwilling to give him what seems to me should be a common courtesy. Again, we're not talking about a criminal investigation. We're talking about the mismanagement of a program, allegations brought by people. Again, my staff has never been able to interview. Never been able to interview. Getting back to the OIG investigation, of course, in a perfect world, I would prefer it be completed before moving forward. And then at one point I thought that it would be. First, let me make it clear to all that there is nothing improper about the chairman of a committee to ask for an update on the status of a pending investigation. There's nothing improper about that. Accordingly, in July, Dr. Coburn joined me in inquiring about the status of this investigation. I was told that it will be completed in October. Again, this is an investigation that started a year earlier, in September of 2012. In October of this year, I inquired again about the status and was told it would be completed in December. On December 2nd, a bipartisan group of committee staff participated in a telephone call with the head of investigations at the Office of Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security to receive a status update. They were told it would likely take 2 or 3 more months to complete the investigation. In fact, every time we have spoken with the IIG staff, we were told that they are just 2 or 3 months away from completing an investigation begun now some 15 months ago. I respect that the OIG must do its job, but we've got to do our job too. And the President has to do his job too. We cannot wait another 2 months every other month, especially for a position as critical as this one. Lest we forget, the Department of Homeland Security is charged with helping to protect our nation and its citizens from all kinds of attack, foreign and domestic. Terrorists from abroad, homegrown terrorists from within, securing our borders, our aircraft, you name it, responding to all kinds of natural disasters, whether they happen to be hurricanes or tornadoes. There's a lot going on. It's a busy neighborhood and a tough neighborhood to try to run and manage an operation. And we need confirmed leadership. I thank our Democrat and Republican colleagues for the vote earlier this week on behalf of Jay Johnson to become the Secretary of the Department. He needs a team. He needs a team. And he needs a team that includes Ali Mayorkas. During the call that I mentioned a little bit ago with the bipartisan committee staff in December of this month, trying to find out the status of the investigation, the OIG confirmed that to date, they found no evidence of criminal wrongdoing by anybody at DHS, including Director Mayorkas. That's right, no evidence. None. Nada. Given that the investigation appears to be months away from conclusion and that its completion date has already slipped several times, and given the confirmation by the OIG that there's no evidence of criminal wrongdoing, I believe it's time to move forward. In fact, it's past time to move forward. The allegations that have been made public cluster around Director Mayorkas' administration of the EB-5 visa program. It is an extremely complicated program that provides foreign investors an opportunity to immigrate to the United States in exchange for significant investments in job-creating enterprises right here in America. The Department of Homeland Security, OIG, just completed an audit of this program, as a matter of fact, but I'll get to that in a little bit. The primary complaint, though, about Director Mayorkas is concerned an EB-5-related application by Gulf Coast Funds Management, the regional center which has ties to Virginia Governor-elect Terry McAuliffe. Anonymous sources have reportedly alleged that Director Mayorkas improperly intervened to help change a draft legal decision so that it would come out in favor of Terry McAuliffe's former company, Green Tech Automotive. First of all, I think it's important for everybody to understand up front that Green Tech did not get what they wanted. Let me say that again. The final decision in this case did not come out of Green Tech's favor from the agency run by Ali Mayorkas. Second, it's important to note that the author of the Green Tech decision, the former head of the Administrative Appeals Court, Appeals Office at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Mr. Perry Rue, told my staff just last week that he strongly disputed the allegation that Director Mayorkas had inappropriately influenced his decision. Many of the other allegations that have been made public about Director Mayorkas' management of the EB-5 program contend that applications appear to have been processed without regard to security concerns. However, in reviewing the leaked emails that were attached to these accusations, Director Mayorkas actually says the exact opposite. I found this disconnect between the allegations and the emails presented as evidence so striking that I'm going to read them exactly. I want us to hear exactly what Director Mayorkas said in his email to subordinates on January 30th of this year concerning an application for a regional center in Las Vegas. This is what he said, quote, "We will take the time needed to resolve the security issue, and we will not act until we've achieved resolution. I agree that we need to run enhanced security and integrity checks." Close quote. This email directly refutes the claim that Director Mayorkas was pushing to expedite applications despite the security concerns raised by his subordinates. In another email attached to one of the letters making accusations against Director Mayorkas forwards a question about Mr. McAuliffe's company to subordinates, and he notes, this is how he notes it, he says, his words, Mr. Mayorkas' words, "I want to make sure that we're providing customer service consistent with our standards, but that we are not providing any preferential treatment." Close quote. Now, I would ask, are these the actions of someone who is trying to exert improper influence or subvert security checks? I think any fair-minded person would agree that the answer is no. No. Even our committee's ranking member, my friend, Dr. Coburn, indicated that the allegations against Mr. Mayorkas, although serious, are most likely not grounded in reality. I don't want to mince his words, so I'll quote him directly. In reference to the allegations against Mr. Mayorkas, Dr. Coburn said at a committee meeting, and again this is a quote, "I doubt that they are true, but we do not have the facts." I agree with Dr. Coburn. We don't have any facts pointing to any sort of wrongdoing by Director Mayorkas at all, as best I can tell. None of the anonymous sources or so-called whistleblowers have prevented information to the majority regarding their concerns, something I think is unprecedented in these types of circumstances for our committee. We've been unable to question those bringing these anonymous concerns on the majority side, and our Republican friends on the committee, and maybe largely in the Senate, have refused to talk to the accused. And he's not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing. That doesn't add up to me. Maybe it does to some people. That just doesn't add up. We don't get to talk to the people who raise these concerns, and our Republican friends won't talk to the accused, who's not been accused of any criminal wrongdoing. On the other hand, we have over 30 people from both sides of the aisle who are well-known and hugely respected citizens. They've gone on the record with glowing support for Director Mayorkas. On the other hand, not one person, not one, has stepped forward publicly opposing Director Mayorkas. Some of the people who have written in strong support of Director Mayorkas include the last Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Jane Hall-Lute, the last Senate-confirmed Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security, Richard Skinner, who's a Bush appointee, and the three most senior border security officials in the George W. Bush administration, Robert Bonner, Ralph Basham, and Jason Ahern. The fact of the matter is that Director Mayorkas has been proactively addressing national security and fraud concerns in the EB-5 program for years. Soon after being confirmed, Director Mayorkas took a number of administrative and operational steps to address national security concerns. Where he lacked the administrative authority to improve the EB-5 program, he repeatedly appealed to Congress for the legislative authority that he needed. Unfortunately, Congress dealt Director Mayorkas and his entire agency a bad hand when we authorized the EB-5 program in 2012. We failed to give the agency any of the legal authorities that Director Mayorkas and his team at CIS had specifically requested in order to enable them. They made this request I believe in June of 2012. They made the request in order to enable them to address the national security and fraud vulnerabilities that it could not address on its own. It said, Congress, we'd like to do this. We need the authority. Please give it to us. They started asking for that in June of 2012. Well, earlier this year, during the Judiciary Committee debate on S-744, Immigration Reform Bill, Senator Leahy introduced an amendment that made virtually all the national security fixes that Director Mayorkas had requested. And while the comprehensive immigration reform passed the Senate with strong bipartisan support, it's unfortunately stalled in the House. Well, fortunately, Senate Committee Chairman Patrick Leahy is working on a standalone bill to address these national security and fraud concerns, much in the way that Director Mayorkas and his team had asked for in June a year ago. I would urge all of my colleagues concerned about security issues in the program to join me as a co-sponsor of that bill. It strikes me as grossly unfair, Madam President, to punish Director Mayorkas for the inability of Congress to address the vulnerabilities in the EB-5 program that Director Mayorkas and his team brought to our attention and asked us to fix over a year and a half ago. In essence, those of us in Congress, we failed to do our job. Yet, Director Mayorkas is taking the fall for our failure. How is that fair? How is that fair? I'll tell you, it's not. I mentioned previously that the OIG completed an EB-5 audit, and although that report has not been publicly released just yet, some of my colleagues have been discussing the OIG's findings earlier today. In light of that, I think this is a good time to get some facts straight, because this audit remarkably misses some key facts. First of all, the report says the EB-5 program is vulnerable to fraud and national security risks, and that the legislation that created the program makes it difficult to fully address those risks. That is something that's been well known by Congress and the administration long before this report, and long before Director Mayorkas took over the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service in August of 2009. The emails I just discussed demonstrate that Director Mayorkas did not take national security and fraud matters lightly. In fact, a review of the legislative history of the last year and a half might suggest that we take them lightly, Well, despite their widespread knowledge about the national security and fraud vulnerabilities in the EB-5 program, and all of these programs for that matter, CIS did not and does not have the authority that it asked Congress for in order to adequately police regional centers and the EB-5 program. I find it incredible that the OIG audit report makes no mention of Director Mayorkas's efforts to get Congress to pass legislation to address this problem since June of 2012. In the absence of being granted those authorities by us, by Congress, Director Mayorkas took it on himself to implement other reforms. Again, many of these reforms took place before or during this audit. And yet, incredibly, those reforms are not even mentioned in the audit report. One of his first actions as the director was to elevate the Fraud Detection and National Security Office to a directorate, reporting directly to him, to Mr. Mayorkas. This ensured that national security professionals had a seat at the management table and a voice in all major decisions. He expanded reporting requirements and security checks for regional centers, which led CIS to increase the number of national security investigations in the EB-5 program by more than 50% in the last 4 years. He increased EB-5 staffing from 9 people in 2009 to more than 80 today, and hired senior economists and national security officers to work side by side with immigration specialists. And he positively engaged other agencies such as the Security and Exchange Commission, the FBI, and the Treasury Department to help police the program. In fact, Senator Grassley himself noted this week that Director Mayorkas convened a National Security Staff Working Group to examine the program last year. Well, the actions I've described are not the actions taken by someone who does not care about national security. The audit report says that the EB-5 adjudication process is ambiguous. Well, CIS has recognized that there was a need for an consolidated adjudication manual, and they published one in May of this year. One more fact that is not even mentioned in the audit report. The audit report says that the program is fraught with the perception of outside influence. There is no denying the fact that this program gets a lot of attention, including from us, from Congress. In fact, the USCIS receives 1,500 queries about the EB-5 program each year from Congress, from senators, from U.S. representatives. 1,500. As it turns out, almost half of our Senate colleagues on both sides of the aisle have inquired about the EB-5 program since 2009. That's an enormous amount of interest from Congress in this one program. But let me be clear. In many cases, most cases, that interest was provided or demonstrated to CIS on behalf of our constituents from states from one corner of America to the other. But let me be clear. The fact that this program garners a lot of attention and a lot of members of Congress and other high-level officials from both parties inquire frequently about the status and prospects of pending applications does not mean that the Citizenship and Immigration Services adjudicators are swayed by the attention. You know, perception is not always reality. Contrary to what some have suggested or assumed, the OIG reported that all the files they reviewed in their audit, including the ones associated with Terry McAuliffe's company, appeared to support the final decision. Let me say that again. The OIG audit concluded that the evidence it reviewed in these cases supported the final decision. Based on the evidence that we have before us, I believe it's clear that Director Mayorkas has taken strong steps to improve the EB-5 program. These are the actions of a dedicated, thoughtful, and committed public servant. The actions of a leader who is willing to make tough but necessary decisions in order to shake things up and improve a program that needed improving. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need at the Department of Homeland Security. I think we need it across federal government. I also believe that we need leaders who are committed to doing what they believe in their heart is the right thing to do. At his confirmation hearing in July, I specifically asked Director Mayorkas about the allegations raised by some of these anonymous sources. Director Mayorkas testified before this committee under oath he has never put his finger on the scale of justice. I have seen no evidence since then that would lead me to question his veracity. I do not believe that we can allow rumors spread by anonymous sources to rule the day. And some of our colleagues have been very critical of DHS's shortcomings, and they're quick to point out its failures. However, one of the major reasons the Department fails to live up to expectations more than they and the rest of us might like is because their top leadership ranks have been riddled with vacancy for much of this year. And the same is true of many other agencies. Again, it's not fair to criticize the agency on the one hand and yet seem content on the other to leave them without consent confirmed leadership for months on end. No, we can't have it both ways. We can't have it both ways. We have some responsibility here as well. It's time to stop playing political games. It's time to vote to confirm Ali Mayorkas for the Deputy Secretary position at DHS. Madam President, there was something else that came to my attention today that I thought was real interesting. It's not from an anonymous source. It's not a rumor or innuendo. It's actually a report from the Partnership for Public Service. One of the things that they do at the partnership is issue on I think maybe an annual basis, the rankings of the best places to work in the federal government in 2013. And as it turns out, also maybe the worst, because they do a ranking from top to bottom. I was dismayed to find out just today that the Department of Homeland Security ranked last. Maybe I heard this yesterday. But anyway, I was dismayed to find out this week that the Department of Homeland Security ranked last on their list of cabinet departments in terms of employee morale. Last. And it's not the first year. It's happened for a number of years in a row. However, although the department ranked last among all the departments, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, led by Director Mayorkas, was one of the highest ranked components within DHS, coming in at, I think, out of 300 federal agencies at number 76, which my math is good. That puts him in maybe the top 25% of all agencies. And after Mr. Mayorkas took over in 2009, employee satisfaction with senior leadership there increased by over 20%, increased by over 20% since he took over in 2009. Every now and then, on driving on my way to the train station in Wilmington to catch a train to come down here to start our day, I listen to the news, usually right at 7 o'clock. About a year ago, I heard a report on NPR of an international study that was done involving thousands of people across the country. And that international study, they asked the same question of thousands of people from all kinds of walks of life and different kinds of jobs and locations. The question that was asked of each of those thousands of people was, what is it about your job that you like? What is it about your job that you like the most? And not surprisingly, those people asked the question had different responses. Some people said they like getting paid. Some people said they liked getting a pension. Some people said they liked having a vacation or having health care. Some people said they liked the environment in which they worked. Some people said they liked the folks they worked with. But you know what most people said? Most people said the thing that they liked most about their job is they felt that the work they were doing was important, and they felt that they were making progress. Think about that. The reason that most people cite for liking their job, the work they do, is because they know it's important and they feel that they're making progress. It's ironic to me that an agency, if you were to rely on the anonymous sources that we've not been, on the majority side, permitted to talk with, it's ironic to me that in a department where morale has been low and a problem and a concern for years, at this agency that Mr. Mayorkas has led now for 4 years, employee morale is, by comparison, fairly high. Fairly high. He doesn't get any credit for that. But if employees really do care that the work they're doing is important and that they're making progress, maybe that belief is reflected in these numbers. Maybe that is reflected in these numbers on behalf of the leadership that Mayorkas has provided for citizenship and immigration services. Let me close if I could. My friend from Kansas has arrived. A couple things I want us to just to keep in mind. Again, I think this is one that's just hard for me to understand. People who are bringing people who we don't know, we've not talked to on the majority side, not had an opportunity to hear from them, to hear their story. And that it's kind of maybe unprecedented for that opportunity to be denied the majority, or for the majority denied to the minority in a case like this. We've been denied that opportunity. And I think the person who's maybe best able to provide, to rebut, or respond to the concerns that have been raised by these anonymous folks that we've not been able to talk to is Mr. Mayorkas himself. But our Republican colleagues have refused to talk to him, even though there's no evidence of criminal wrongdoing. They refused to talk to him to give him a chance to rebut or respond to the accusations from anonymous sources that we've never heard from. That one just blows my mind. If the shoe were on the other foot, if Democrats were in the minority and Republicans were in the majority, if I were the ranking member on the minority side, we had a Republican president who had nominated somebody for an office, and the chairman of our committee asked me as the ranking minority to meet with someone that the Republican president had nominated, I'd meet with him in a heartbeat. I'd want to hear that person's story. That's what I'd want to hear. And I would encourage if the anonymous sources were talking just to us, I'd encourage them to talk to the other side as well and find a way. The one person we did talk to, and we got this person, Mr. Rue, we got his name, I think, out of a statement given by Senator Grassley on the floor, and we talked to him, and he set the record straight. He set the record straight. I've already cited that in my comments. But we've never had the chance to talk to any other, I think, half dozen or so sources. The other thing I would say, there's nothing inappropriate for a committee chairman or the staff of a committee chairman to inquire of an OIG about the pace and the resources provided to conduct an investigation. This is just not any department that's lacked leadership, Senate-confirmed leadership for months. This is the Department of Homeland Security. Americans have a lot riding on that department doing their job well. They need senior leadership, and they haven't had the kind that they need. But despite the repeated efforts to get the OIG to expedite their efforts begun in September 2012, a joint letter from Dr. Coburn and me to the OIG in July of this year. 2 months later, I get a response that maybe we'll have something in October. 2 months later, it's December. Bipartisan staff, Democrat, Republican, minority, majority, have a chance to be briefed by the OIG. And rather than say, well, this investigation that we started 15 months ago is done, is ready to wrap up, they said a couple more months, maybe 2 or 3 more months. Are we supposed to continue to wait if we have the leadership that we need at Department of Homeland Security? At some point, you just say, enough already. And what we've learned is that in terms of full-time people working on this, there are about 650, I think, full-time equivalent people at the Office Inspector General at DHS, about 650. And as I understand it, 3 full-time people, 1 investigator, and 2 research assistants have been devoted to this investigation. No wonder it's taken 15 months. I'd ask us to keep in mind our failure to act on the recommendations made to Congress for reforms in the EB-5 program to address national security concerns and to address concerns about fraud. Mr. Mayorkas did the right thing. He and his staff pulled together a long list of changes that they need, legislative changes they need, so they'd be authorized to address this concern. We dropped the ball. We didn't include those changes when we reauthorized the EB-5 program for 3 more years, a straight reauthorization. Didn't make any reforms, didn't make any changes, despite the fact that he had suggested them months before we acted. And finally, they ended up in, those changes ended up in the immigration bill. We passed it here. Most Democrats voted for it, some Republicans. It's over in the House, it's languishing and not moving. If we're really concerned about giving this agency, CIS, the tools that they need, the authority they need to address these security concerns, fraud concerns, why don't we join Senator Leahy in the legislation he's going to introduce that specifically from the, really largely taken from the immigration reform bill, and when he introduces, let's co-sponsor that bill. And finally, if we're going to accept as gospel criticisms about the way a person has run a particular agency, and not of a criminal nature, but criticisms about the way it's been run, why not give that person a chance to defend themselves? Why not give them a chance to say, well, there's another side to the story. Or maybe there isn't, but at least give them that opportunity. And lastly, the morale at the Department of Homeland Security, they do some great work, important work at the Department of Homeland Security. And they do a lot better work. I'll mention a couple things if I can. Remember the response of FEMA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security? Remember their response to Katrina? It was deplorable. How about the response of FEMA to Hurricane Sandy? All around, for the most part, all around, kudos were won. How about TSA? TSA has been a whipping boy for a lot of folks, all of us who have the opportunities to fly commercially. We've seen TSA make changes. They've taken criticism, they take them to heart. Among other things, they have created trusted traveler programs so a lot of people don't have to take off their shoes or their belts or, you know, do all kinds of things to get through a security check. The TSA has done a number of things. Some of the technology that they're using is not intrusive as it was before. Security is actually stronger. And most recently, for 10 years, the our friends at GAO, Government Accountability Office, have every 2 years on their high-risk list at the beginning of every Congress, have cited that Department of Homeland Security needs to be able to earn a clean financial audit of their books. They said 10 years, that's enough time. Well, it turns out the Department of Defense, which has been around since, gosh, about 70 years, oh no, over 60 years ago, they're not auditable. Department of Defense isn't auditable, much less have a clean audit. Well, last week, the Department of Homeland Security, for the first time in their existence, received a clean financial audit. They did it in 10 years. DOD, also a big operation, it's 60 years and counting, and they're not even auditable yet. So for those who want to constantly criticize the Department of Homeland Security, I would just say the people who work there work hard, they have a tough job, they need our help. And one of the things they need our help in doing is securing the kind of leadership that they haven't had, and that's confirmed Senate leadership. We've had some very good people who have been acting as the secretary, acting as the deputy secretary. But friends, it's not the same. It's not the same. They need leadership that's going to be there with not just the blessing of the president, but the blessing of this body, and who are going to be there today, tomorrow, next month, next year, and provide the leadership that's needed. The most important element I've ever seen, my time in the Navy, 23 years active in reserve, my time as governor, my time here in the Senate, most important element I've ever seen in any organization to determine whether it's going to be successful is leadership. You show me a school with a great principal, I'll show you a school that's on the way up. I don't care how ineffective the teachers might be. I'll show you a school that's on the way up. You show me a business with a strong leader. Same is true. Show me a body like this or a military unit. Leadership is always the key. And it's the key at the Department of Homeland Security. And if the Improvement that I've noted, mentioned here just a minute ago, is to continue and actually be strengthened. They need confirmed Senate leadership. We'll have the opportunity in a couple of hours to give Jay Johnson, the newly confirmed Secretary of Homeland Security, a key player in the leadership team that he's trying to build that department. He deserves our support, and so do the people of that department. And if they get it, they'll provide the support that we need in this country to be safer in the days ahead. Madam President, thank you for allowing me to give this statement. I see my friend from Kansas is on the floor, and I thank him for his patience, and I'm happy to yield the floor.
President.
From Kansas.
Thank you, Madam President. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Joshua B. Silverman, age 35, Scottsdale, Arizona.